Digital Revenge. Part 1. The Discovery. Chapter 1. The First Clue. Lauren sat in her home office, the low hum of her computer fans a constant background to her late-night routine. The room was dim, lit only by the cool glow of her dual monitors, which reflected off her glasses as she stared intently at her latest task. Another security breach to analyze, another encryption to crack. As a cybersecurity expert, this was her life. Days and nights spent fortifying digital walls and protecting sensitive information from prying eyes. The irony was not lost on her. She was a guardian of secrets, a digital detective, yet the most critical breach of all was unfolding right under her roof, unnoticed until tonight. The sharp buzz of a phone notification broke the quiet. Lauren paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Brian's phone, left abandoned on the kitchen counter, lit up with the message preview on display. Normally she would have ignored it. Brian's personal life was his own, but the words flashing on the screen gripped her like a vice, making her stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night." The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her thoughts. Her heart raced as her mind scrambled to make sense of what she saw. It could be a work thing, maybe a joke, she reasoned with herself, but that small, nagging voice inside refused to be silenced. Brian had been distant lately, more than just the usual work stress. Their once easy conversations had dwindled into polite exchanges. Affection, once freely given, now felt strained and obligatory. And then there were the late nights, the unexplained absences he passed off as work dinners and networking events. He had become a ghost in their home. She stared at the name, Samantha, her brain working overtime to recall if she had ever heard that name before. It wasn't familiar. She picked up his phone, her hands shaking slightly, the logical part of her mind urging her to stop, to trust her husband. But it was already too late. The message preview had opened a door, and she wasn't turning back. Lauren's technical expertise kicked in like muscle memory. She knew his passcode, had known it for years. A few quick taps, and she was in. What she found made her blood run cold. The messages were explicit, filled with flirtation, secret plans, and worse, love. She scrolled through months of conversations, each one a dagger twisting deeper into her chest. Pictures of Brian and Samantha together, stolen moments captured in photos he never thought she'd see. They were all there, evidence of a relationship she hadn't known existed, but could no longer deny. Her breath hitched, but she refused to cry. Not yet. The shock was too fresh and the betrayal too deep to be fully processed. There was no room for tears, only the searing heat of disbelief and the growing weight of determination. Lauren closed her eyes for a moment, letting the gravity of what she had just uncovered settle in. This wasn't a fling. It wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully orchestrated lie, one that Brian had kept from her for months. And now she had the proof. She could have stormed into their bedroom, woken him up, and demanded answers. She could have thrown his phone at him, demanded to know how long he had been sneaking around, tearing apart their life with this woman. But that wasn't her. Emotional outbursts wouldn't fix this, and they wouldn't give her the control she so desperately needed right now. No, Lauren was a planner, a strategist, and this was a war she was going to win. Her fingers moved swiftly over her keyboard, her mind shifting into full investigative mode. She hacked into his email first, then his social media accounts. The digital trail Brian thought he had hidden was laid bare before her. Deleted messages, private chats, plans for weekends he claimed to be on business trips. All there, waiting for her to uncover. Every new piece of information only fueled her growing resolve. It wasn't just an affair. It was a double life, and he had been living it for months. Hours passed in silence as Lauren pieced together the puzzle, meticulously combing through his digital history. Her training had prepared her for situations like this, but never had she imagined applying those skills to her own marriage. The cold, sterile world of cybersecurity had now become intensely personal. By the time the sun's early light began to filter through the blinds, Lauren had all the evidence she needed. But instead of breaking, instead of succumbing to the crushing weight of betrayal, something else rose inside her, a cold, calculated resolve. She wasn't going to be a victim. No, she was going to destroy him, and she was going to do it in the way she knew best, through the very digital landscape he had thought was his playground. She shut the laptop slowly, the noise of it clicking shut echoing through the now eerily quiet house. The pieces were in place. Brian would never see it coming. Lauren sat back in her chair, staring out the window at the slowly brightening sky. She could already feel the plan forming in her mind, the steps she would take to dismantle his life, piece by piece. He had underestimated her, and that would be his downfall. This wasn't going to be a messy confrontation filled with screaming and tears. No, when she was done, Brian wouldn't have a life left to explain. Chapter 2. The Plan. Lauren didn't sleep that night. The revelation of Brian's betrayal sat heavy in her chest, but instead of letting it crush her, she transformed the weight into focus. She leaned over her desk, her fingers moving swiftly over her keyboard, pulling up everything she needed. Brian had been careless, never once considering that the same skills she used to protect corporations from cyber attacks could be used against him. She had always been the silent protector, securing their household's finances and keeping tabs on any potential threats. Now she would turn those skills inward, and Brian would never know what hit him. The plan took shape gradually, like a puzzle being assembled piece by piece. Lauren knew her husband's digital presence as well as she knew her own. His passwords, security questions, and even his two-factor authentication. She had helped him set it all up. He had no idea how exposed he truly was, how vulnerable his life had become in her hands. She almost found it laughable, but there was no humor in what she was about to do. She started with his social media accounts: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. These were the carefully curated highlights of his life. The platforms where he posted pictures from work events, family holidays, and weekends away. The same weekends that she now knew he'd spent with Samantha. She envisioned the fallout, the carefully built facade of his life, collapsing under the weight of the truth. His friends, family, and colleagues would all bear witness to the real Brian, the man who lied to everyone, not just her. Lauren's mind clicked through the steps like an algorithm, her thoughts as precise as the code she often worked with. First, she would access his email. Simple enough. Brian used the same password for everything, a lazy habit she had chastised him for more than once. She logged in without trouble, scrolling through emails filled with confirmations of hotel bookings and gifts sent to Samantha. She saved everything, archiving it for later use. Next, she hacked into his social media accounts. It wasn't even difficult. His passwords were predictable. Some combination of their wedding anniversary, his mother's maiden name, and his favorite sports team. Lauren shook her head in disbelief. He had been so careless, trusting that no one would ever look too closely, not realizing that the person he needed to fear most was the one who knew him best. Once inside his accounts, Lauren began organizing the evidence she had gathered. screenshots of incriminating texts or photos he had sent to Samantha, and every message he had ever exchanged with her were carefully saved into a folder. It wasn't enough to expose him privately. No, this had to be public, for everyone to see. She would schedule posts across all his platforms, leaking the affair bit by bit until there was nothing left for him to hide. Each post would be timed perfectly to ensure maximum exposure. She'd start with a few cryptic messages, maybe a photo of Brian and Samantha together, a suggestive comment, something that would catch people's attention. Then, as curiosity and suspicion grew, she would release the explicit evidence. One after another, the posts would appear, revealing the full extent of his deception. But the public humiliation was just the beginning. Lauren's next step would be to drain his accounts. As his wife, she had always had access to their shared finances, but Brian also had private accounts, ones she had helped him set up when they first got married. Those accounts were about to be emptied, every last cent transferred out before he even realized what was happening. She smirked at the thought of him checking his balance and finding nothing. It wasn't just about taking his money, though. No, Lauren had bigger plans for that. The funds would be anonymously donated to a charity, perhaps a cause supporting victims of infidelity or empowering women. It would be the final act of poetic justice. She began outlining the sequence of events, planning each move with the same meticulous attention to detail that she applied to her work. She made a list of all the passwords, security questions, and accounts she needed to access. Everything had to be perfect, and she wouldn't leave any room for error. Access Brian's email. This was the nerve center of his digital life. From here, Lauren would gain control of his entire online presence. Once she was inside, she could reset passwords, change settings, and retrieve deleted messages. His email was the gateway to his world, and she already had the keys. Social media accounts. Facebook would be the first target. She would post a few suggestive messages at first, subtle, but enough to raise eyebrows. Next, Instagram, the photos he had sent to Samantha, the ones of them together at dinner, the ones he had deleted from his own account, would be posted for all to see. Finally, Twitter, where she would expose the conversations that painted a clear picture of his infidelity. She imagined the chaos that would ensue, the messages and calls he would receive from shocked friends, confused family, and furious colleagues. Financial accounts. This was the real blow. She would move systematically, starting with their joint account, and then targeting his personal savings. The transfers would be quick, untraceable, and by the time Brian noticed, the money would already be gone. She'd research the best methods to donate anonymously, ensuring that there would be no trail leading back to her. Brian would never be able to recover the funds, and worse, he would have to explain to everyone why he suddenly had nothing. Schedule the posts. Timing was everything. The first post would go up in the late afternoon, right when Brian was likely in a meeting or otherwise unable to respond. It would be a simple picture of him and Samantha, nothing too damning, just enough to spark curiosity. As the hours passed, more posts would appear, texts, photos, screenshots, each one more damaging than the last. By the time Brian had a chance to react, his digital life would be in flames. Leave Lauren would leave before the final phase of the plan went into motion. She had already started looking for apartments in a new city, somewhere far away where she could start fresh. The divorce papers would be filed, and by the time Brian realized what had happened, she would be long gone. Lauren smiled grimly as she outlined the final details. It was cold, it was calculated, and it was exactly what he deserved. There was no room for regret or second thoughts. Brian had shattered her heart, and now she would shatter his life. Every step of the plan was crafted with precision, and she felt no remorse. With the groundwork laid, Lauren sat back and took a deep breath, her pulse steady, as the reality of what she was about to do settled in. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Brian had taken everything from her, and now she would take everything from him. And when it was all over, when his life had crumbled, and he was left with nothing, Lauren would be free. Free from the lies, free from the pain, and free to rebuild her life on her own terms. She looked at the clock. The sun would be up soon, and Brian would be waking up for another day of his carefully constructed life. He had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. Lauren closed her laptop, the plan locked in place, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to smile. The game had just begun, and she was already winning. Chapter 3. Creating the Trap. Lauren spent the next few weeks meticulously preparing for her digital strike, each day adding another layer to her plan while maintaining the facade of a loving wife. Every moment was an exercise in patience, a dance of deception as she ensured everything would go off without a hitch. She had learned long ago that the best revenge is served cold and calculated, and she was determined to execute her plan flawlessly. In the beginning it was subtle. Lauren started by resetting Brian's passwords and altering his account recovery options, simple enough changes that would go unnoticed by him. He trusted her implicitly, never questioning her technical prowess or her access to their shared devices. Every evening, while Brian settled into his usual routine, Lauren would casually sit at her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she adjusted settings and gathered information. She made sure to change passwords frequently, keeping them out of his reach while maintaining a mental note of every new combination. To cover her tracks further, Lauren created a series of fake accounts and burner emails. Each new identity was carefully crafted, with profiles that could easily pass as real users. These accounts would serve as her front lines, her tools for manipulation. She constructed a persona of a friendly co-worker, a distant cousin, even a supportive friend, all to orchestrate the narrative she wanted to build around Brian's exposure. Each message sent from these accounts was innocuous, appearing as casual interactions that would raise no suspicion. Simultaneously, she began gathering information about the people who would be most affected by Brian's exposure. His co-workers, his friends, his family. Lauren wanted them all to see the truth, to bear witness to the fallout of his infidelity in real time. This required a careful approach. She knew that the shock value of the reveal would only be effective if it reached the right audience. She hacked into Brian's work email, her heart racing with both excitement and a tinge of adrenaline. It was thrilling to slip through the digital cracks of his professional life, monitoring conversations with colleagues as she took notes on upcoming events and gatherings. She noted a few company functions, including a large quarterly meeting set for next week. Perfect timing. By strategically choosing to release the information during such an event, she could ensure maximum visibility and impact. The thought of Brian standing in front of his co-workers, trapped in a web of lies, filled her with a sense of satisfaction. Lauren's tech skills made all this too easy. With years of experience in cybersecurity, navigating firewalls, bypassing security protocols, and manipulating digital systems, felt like second nature. She took pride in her ability to maintain anonymity, ensuring no trace of her involvement would be left behind. But what surprised her most was how easy it was to detach herself emotionally from the task. She had once loved Brian deeply, recalling moments of laughter, intimacy, and companionship that felt like another lifetime. Now that love seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the cold resolve that took its place. Each evening, as Brian unwittingly went about his life, Lauren found herself consumed by a sense of empowerment. She had the upper hand. She was the one in control. He had made his choice, and now she was making hers. The night before she was set to launch her plan, Lauren sat in her office, staring at the multiple screens glowing before her. The blue light illuminated her determined expression, and she allowed herself a moment of reflection. Everything was ready. The posts were scheduled, the emails drafted, and the evidence carefully organized. Tomorrow Brian's world would come crashing down, and there would be no turning back. Lauren leaned back in her chair, her heart steady, as she mentally reviewed her strategy one last time. She could feel the weight of anticipation in the air, the calm before the storm that would soon engulf her life. She envisioned the chaos, the confusion, and the devastation that would ripple through Brian's carefully constructed world. It was exhilarating to think about the moment he would realize that he had lost everything. His reputation, his friends, his status, all because of his own actions. As she took a deep breath, Lauren reminded herself of the resolve that fueled her actions. This was not just revenge, it was justice. Brian had taken everything from her, and now it was her turn to take it all back. She relished the thought of his shock and despair, the realization that he had underestimated her, the woman he had betrayed. With a final glance at the clock, she felt the adrenaline surge within her. Tomorrow marked the beginning of her liberation. Tomorrow, she would unleash the carefully crafted trap and watch as Brian's world unraveled. Chapter 4. The Calm Before the Storm. The morning of the plan, Lauren moved through the routine of her day as if everything were normal. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. She greeted Brian with a bright smile, as if nothing was amiss, and they shared the familiar ritual of breakfast together. She made his favorite omelet, complete with diced bell peppers and a sprinkle of cheese, all while suppressing the chaos brewing inside her mind. As Brian prepared to leave for work, Lauren leaned in to plant a quick kiss on his cheek. "Have a great day," she chirped, her voice steady and light. He smiled back, oblivious, grabbing his bag and heading out the door. The sound of the door clicking shut sent a wave of exhilaration through her. This would be the last time he walked out of their home with his life intact, and the thought sent a shiver of satisfaction down her spine. Once he was gone, the house felt eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the facade she had just maintained. Lauren closed the door and took a moment to breathe deeply, letting the adrenaline pulse through her veins. This was it, the calm before the storm. She walked into her home office, feeling an electric thrill as she settled into her chair, her fingers hovering over the keyboard like a pianist before a grand performance. With a steadying breath, Lauren logged into Brian's social media accounts. The screens flickered to life, illuminating the evidence of his digital life. She navigated through the interface with practiced ease, preparing to unleash the posts that would expose his affair to the world. She had meticulously collected damning evidence over the past weeks. Photos of Brian and Samantha, stolen moments captured in cheerful selfies and cozy dinner shots that betrayed their intimate connection. Lauren's heart raced as she selected the images, her finger hovering over the post button. Next, she scrolled through their conversations, flirtatious messages brimming with affection, plans for secret meetings, and even steamy exchanges that left no room for doubt. Each screenshot was a piece of the puzzle that would lay bare Brian's betrayal, a digital witness to the lies he had spun. She strategically timed the posts to go live right in the middle of Brian's work meeting, ensuring he would be helpless to stop the cascade of revelations. Once she had set the schedule, she turned her attention to his bank accounts. She had been careful not to touch his finances until the very last moment, but now it was time to strike a final blow. She logged into the banking app, her fingers moving deftly across the touch screen. A cool detachment washed over her as she initiated a transfer, siphoning every penny from his accounts into an anonymous charity. It was a hefty sum, one that would certainly leave him reeling. But Lauren had also made sure to leave just enough money for him to buy a bus ticket out of town, a small mercy that felt almost poetic. As she confirmed the transfer, a notification popped up on the screen, informing her that a thank you message would be sent to Brian's email. A wicked smile spread across her face at the thought of him receiving that notification, thanking him for his generous donation while his world crumbled around him. The irony was delicious, a perfect touch to her meticulously crafted plan. With everything in place, Lauren leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding in anticipation. The tension in the air felt palpable, almost electric. She took a moment to glance around her office, her sanctuary, and felt an overwhelming sense of empowerment. She had taken control of her narrative, transforming her pain into a powerful strategy for revenge. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each passing second heightening her anticipation. Lauren felt a thrill at the thought of what was about to unfold. Brian would soon realize that his betrayal had consequences far beyond his wildest imagination. As she waited for the moment to arrive, she steeled herself for the chaos that would follow. Tomorrow would mark the end of his charade and the beginning of her liberation. Chapter 5. The First Posts. At exactly 11:30 a.m., the plan kicked into high gear. Lauren had timed everything meticulously, and as the clock struck, the first post went live on Brian's Facebook account. The screen lit up with a picture that would shatter his carefully curated image. A snapshot of Brian and Samantha at a restaurant, their hands intertwined across the table, oblivious to the world around them. The caption, crafted with a biting edge, read, "When you think you can live two lives, but the truth always comes out." The moment the post was published, a wave of activity surged through the platform. Likes, comments, and shares began to flood in almost instantly, each ping echoing like a countdown to Brian's impending humiliation. Lauren felt a rush of adrenaline as she observed the reactions unfold. Friends and family were drawn to the post, like moths to a flame, each grappling with the shocking revelation of Brian's betrayal. Some responses were filled with disbelief, while others brimmed with outrage, but all of them were captivated by the unfolding drama that was Brian's private life, now laid bare for the world to see. From the safety of her office, Lauren felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as she watched the chaos unfold. She had set up her screens to monitor Brian's work email, and within moments, messages began pouring in from concerned co-workers and confused family members. She imagined him sitting in his meeting, totally unaware of the storm brewing outside. The juxtaposition between the mundane discussions in his office and the explosive revelations on his social media was almost poetic. As she sipped her coffee, Lauren could see the flurry of emails hitting Brian's inbox. "Is this real?" one colleague wrote, their disbelief palpable. Another message read, "You need to check your Facebook." The mounting concern from his peers painted a vivid picture of Brian's growing panic, which only fueled Lauren's excitement. At noon, the second post went live, escalating the situation further. This time, it was a screenshot of an intimate text conversation between Brian and Samantha, complete with heart emojis and explicit promises of their next rendezvous. Lauren crafted the caption to cut deep, simply stating, "Caught red-handed." The weight of those 3 words was like a sledgehammer, and she knew it would resonate with everyone who saw it. With this post, the floodgates opened. Notifications went wild as people commented, tagged one another, and shared the post. Friends speculated, and family members reacted with a mix of shock and betrayal. "How could he?" one of Brian's cousins posted, while another chimed in with a string of shocked emojis, capturing the essence of disbelief that enveloped his social circle. Lauren leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile creeping onto her face. She could only imagine the scene unfolding at Brian's workplace. His phone must have been buzzing non-stop, notifications lighting up his screen like a Christmas tree. The thought of him struggling to manage the onslaught of messages filled her with a sense of triumph. As more reactions poured in, Lauren could see the panic start to set in through his work email. Colleagues began sending urgent messages, urging him to check his social media. She envisioned him glancing at his phone, confusion morphing into horror as the reality of his situation dawned on him. What the hell is going on? She could almost hear him muttering to himself. Brian's meticulously maintained facade was crumbling before his eyes, and Lauren savored every second of it. She had anticipated his shock, but she knew that nothing could prepare him for the tidal wave of messages from friends and family, each one a reminder of the life he had betrayed. As she continued to monitor the chaos, Lauren felt a mix of exhilaration and catharsis. This was her moment of reckoning, a chance to reclaim her power and expose the man who had shattered her trust. The digital unraveling was just beginning, and she was ready for the aftermath. With one final glance at the screen, she whispered to herself, "Welcome to your new reality, Brian." Chapter 6. The Public Humiliation. At exactly 1 p.m., the front door swung open with a bang, and Brian burst into the house, his face pale, eyes wide with panic. His phone was clutched tightly in his hand, knuckles white from the pressure. Lauren had been waiting for this moment, seated calmly at the kitchen table with her laptop open, the screen still glowing with the aftermath of her orchestrated chaos. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a volatile mix of anger and fear. His eyes darted around the room as if looking for some kind of refuge from the reality crashing down on him. "Someone's hacked into my accounts. They're posting all these lies about me." Lauren looked up from her screen, her expression unfazed and coolly composed, as if she were merely discussing the weather. "They're not lies, Brian." In an instant, the realization washed over him, a tidal wave of dread crashing into the remnants of his confidence. He froze, mouth agape, eyes widening in horror. You did this?" His voice dropped to a whisper, disbelief mingling with the dawning comprehension of his wife's calculated revenge. She nodded slowly, deliberately, letting her words sink in like heavy stones. "I found out about Samantha weeks ago. I've been planning this ever since." The weight of her admission was palpable. Brian stumbled back, his legs giving way as he sank into a chair, the very foundations of his world quaking beneath him. "You ruined my life," he whispered, a tremor in his voice that revealed both anger and despair. Lauren raised an eyebrow, her expression unyielding. "No, Brian. You ruined your life the moment you decided to cheat. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." Each word she spoke felt like a strike of lightning, illuminating the darkness of his deceit and echoing the truth he had tried to bury. He stared at her, disbelief etched across his face, hands trembling as he reached for his phone, desperation mounting. "I'll fix this. I'll delete everything. "You won't," Lauren interrupted, her voice sharp and steady. She leaned forward slightly, letting the finality of her words wash over him. "I've already locked you out of your accounts. You can't stop it now." Brian's face contorted in horror, the implications of her statement seeping in. Panic surged through him as he frantically tried to access his social media. Each attempt was met with failure. The realization that he was powerless against her meticulous planning sent a jolt of fear through him. His digital life, once so carefully crafted, was unraveling before his very eyes, a thread pulled until the entire tapestry of his existence began to fray. Lauren watched him with a detached sense of satisfaction, feeling a surge of triumph as he floundered in confusion. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when he would truly understand the consequences of his betrayal. The roles had reversed, and the once dominant figure in their relationship was now a shell of his former self, stripped of power and pride. As she observed the chaos in his eyes, she felt a mix of vindication and resolve. This was not just revenge. It was a reclamation of her identity, her strength. Brian's arrogance, his betrayal, and his assumption that he could live a double life without repercussions were all laid bare. "Please, Lauren," he stammered, desperation creeping into his tone, his facade crumbling faster than the reputation he had built. "You don't have to do this. We can fix this together." The irony of his plea didn't escape her. He had never once considered the damage he had inflicted on her heart, her trust, or their life together. The coldness in her chest melted away any flicker of empathy she might have felt. "There's nothing to fix, Brian," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "You made your choice, and now everyone will see the man you truly are." The room was thick with tension as silence enveloped them. Brian's shoulders sagged, defeated, and the fight within him seemed to dissipate like smoke in the wind. Lauren allowed herself a moment to savor the power she wielded, the control she had regained. As the clock ticked on, she knew the next phase of her plan would unfold soon. She could only imagine the wave of messages, the confusion, the betrayal that would ripple through Brian's life. The public humiliation had begun, and she was ready to watch it all unravel. Chapter 7. The Final Blow. As Brian sat there, paralyzed by disbelief and dread, Lauren leaned forward, her heart racing with a mix of satisfaction and finality. The chaotic whirlwind of emotions he had just experienced was only a precursor to what she was about to deliver. She pulled up his bank account on her laptop, her fingers steady as she navigated to the screen, deliberately turning it toward him. His eyes widened in horror as he saw the empty balance staring back at him, a stark, unforgiving void that signified the reality of his situation. It was a punch to the gut, a visceral reminder that his life was spiraling out of control. "I transferred everything," Lauren said calmly, her voice even, almost devoid of emotion. "It's all gone, donated to charity." The words hung in the air like a death knell, each syllable echoing with the weight of her betrayal. Brian's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He was utterly destroyed. The realization crashed over him like a tidal wave, drowning any remnants of defiance he had left. His eyes darted back to the screen, desperation creeping in as he processed what had just happened. Every penny he had worked for, every ounce of security he had clung to, vanished in an instant, sacrificed on the altar of his own infidelity. Lauren remained composed, the corners of her mouth hinting at a small, satisfied smirk as she observed his unraveling. She reveled in this moment, the culmination of her careful planning and execution. With a few clicks, she had dismantled the life he had built on deceit. Brian had played with fire, and now he was getting burned, left to deal with the ashes of his choices. Standing up, Lauren closed her laptop with a deliberate snap, the sound resonating through the heavy silence of the room. She slipped it into her bag with an air of finality, as if sealing away the remnants of their shared life. "I'm leaving, Brian," she announced, her tone firm and unwavering. "I've already filed for divorce, and you'll be served the papers tomorrow." The words hung like a noose, tightening around Brian's neck as he looked up at her, desperation shining in his eyes. "Please, Lauren, don't do this," he pleaded, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. "I'll make it right. You can't," she cut him off, her voice sharp and resolute. "It's over. You've lost everything." The conviction in her tone left no room for argument, no possibility for reconciliation. This was the end, and there would be no second chances. Without another word, Lauren turned and walked toward the door, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and relief. Each step felt lighter as she left Brian alone in the ruins of his life. She could hear his anguished breaths behind her, the sound of a man grappling with the consequences of his own betrayal. As she stepped outside into the fresh air, a wave of empowerment washed over her. The weight of her sorrow began to lift, replaced by a sense of liberation. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her strength. The storm was over, and she had weathered it with grace. As she walked away from the house, the finality of her decision settled in. There was no turning back. She was free, and Brian would have to face the fallout of his actions alone. With each step, she felt the shackles of her old life breaking away, allowing her to forge a new path, one that was entirely her own. Chapter 8. Starting anew. In the weeks that followed, Lauren set about rebuilding her life, each day a testament to her resilience and determination. The initial shock of leaving Brian behind still echoed in her mind, but she embraced the chaos that came with change. Moving to a new city offered a fresh start, an opportunity to shed the remnants of her past. She found a cozy apartment in a vibrant neighborhood, its walls adorned with the potential of new memories waiting to be made. The morning light poured through the large windows, filling the space with warmth as Lauren unpacked the last of her boxes. She hung her favorite paintings on the walls, each stroke of color a reminder of her journey and the strength she had discovered within herself. Gone were the days of silence and betrayal. Now her apartment buzzed with the sound of hope and possibility. Lauren secured a new job at a leading cybersecurity firm, leveraging her skills to help others protect themselves from the very threats she had once navigated in her personal life. Each project she tackled filled her with a sense of purpose, reigniting her passion for technology. Her colleagues were supportive and encouraging, creating a collaborative environment that inspired her to grow both professionally and personally. She thrived in this new atmosphere, her confidence blossoming with each success. She also began exploring her new city, diving into its culture, its food, and its people. The weekends were filled with adventures, visiting art galleries, attending local festivals, and meeting new friends who welcomed her with open arms. With each passing day, Lauren felt more at home, more alive than she had in years. The pain Brian had caused began to fade, replaced by laughter and connection. In stark contrast, Brian found himself trapped in the wreckage of his own choices. The aftermath of his betrayal was unforgiving. His once thriving career lay in ruins. Colleagues and friends, those he had thought would stand by him, distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with a man whose infidelity had been laid bare for all to see. The whispers of scandal followed him like shadows, a constant reminder of his failure. He became a pariah, the stigma of his actions clinging to him, suffocating any hope of redemption. With his bank accounts drained and no means to support himself, Brian struggled to find work. He watched helplessly as the life he had built crumbled into dust. The very social network he had relied on for validation turned its back on him, leaving him isolated in a world he had once ruled. Friends who had cheered him on at his successes now looked upon him with disdain, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the one who had betrayed his wife so brutally. As the weeks turned into months, Lauren's heart swelled with pride at the life she was crafting. She was no longer defined by her past, but by her resilience and ambition. She had taken the worst pain and transformed it into the fuel for her success. The future glowed brightly ahead, a landscape filled with endless possibilities, while Brian languished in the shadows of his own making. Every night, as she fell asleep in her new apartment, Lauren reflected on how far she had come. She had faced betrayal head-on and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. The journey had been fraught with anguish, but she had turned that anguish into empowerment. Now she could truly move forward, ready to embrace all that life had to offer. For Brian, however, the darkness had only just begun. Each day was a reminder of the life he had lost and the choices he had made. He would spend his days in a haze of regret, haunted by the memories of what could have been, while Lauren thrived in the light of her newfound freedom. The chapter of their lives had closed, and in its wake, Lauren found not just revenge, but the strength to start anew.